This podcast is proudly sponsored by Independent Financial Advisors GLAMS IFA. A huge favour from me, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a follow on whichever podcast platform you're using. It really would mean the world to us. We've got a great episode for you today, so without further ado, on with the pod. Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. My name is Charlie Chami. I'm an independent financial advisor and director at GLAMS IFA and co-founder of the Private Client Network. We're a networking group for private client professionals trying to close the gap between our various professions so we can improve our collective knowledge, improve the service to our clients, and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Rebecca Purchase, partner in the private client team at RWK Goodman. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start off how I always start off. Back in the beginning, why did you choose law?
Oh gosh, I've been thinking about this and wondering where it began. So when I was in school, there weren't really many options in terms of knowing what you want to do. Like we weren't really exposed to many professions. I distinctly remember in when you have like your careers fair when you're in comprehensive school, the only person I really spoke to was a solicitor. And then when I did my work experience, I did my work experience at a solicitor's office, and that was at like 14, 15. And I went back there every Easter and every summer until I was 21.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's
so it
cool.
was really so it was the only profession that I really knew about. No one told me about kind of becoming a financial advisor or an
Ah,
accountant. It was kind of like you either become a solicitor or you look at medicine if you were quite bright and good at science. So I remember having a conversation with my science teacher about maybe medicine or dentistry, but I really hated science. I was good at it, but I hated it. So I was like, oh no, I don't want to do science. So yeah, I just kind of fell into it. It just seemed like a good option in terms of I enjoyed doing law at A level, so it made sense to kind of go into that profession.
it's one of
But I
the,
think looking back now, yeah, if I had to do it all over again, I wish I knew more about finance and accounts because I quite like that kind of side of things. So yeah, I think I fell into it because I didn't really know what else was out there. But yeah, that's probably why.
I think I've said this before, but I think it's one of the real strengths of the legal profession is that it does just have that draw for so many people, like from a really early age without any sort of specific effort in that, like to sort of generate it. I just think it's an attractive field and everyone knows about it, and it helps that it's sort of in films and drama series. Whether they are accurate to how the job actually is probably debatable, but it doesn't matter. It generates like an enthusiasm for people to go into it. And I do think even at school age, people are like, it's one of the careers that people just naturally think about.
I think that's completely correct. I mean, thinking about when I was young, I loved Legally Blonde. I watched Ally McBeal, so that probably had a massive impact on why I chose to do law, even though it's nothing
Yeah.
like it is in the movies and the TV shows. But if you think about it on TV, you're not exposed to many other professions besides that and medicine. So I think especially if I came from a town where my school didn't even do A levels. So in terms of what you wanted to do, there wasn't really that longevity in thinking about other professions. So your exposure to other professions came from TV and film rather
Yeah,
than
I think that's the case for
professions around
a
it.
lot of people. So did you know, so as far back as like choosing A levels, was it with I suppose you did a law A level, so I guess so, but you thinking about it as far back as then?
Yeah, I guess so. I had an interest in politics, so I thought I wanted to do politics. So for A level, I couldn't do A levels at my school, so I had to go to college, which meant that I got a bigger range of A levels to choose from. So I ended up doing law, history, and politics as my A levels.
Oh, wow.
Um, so that then fell into I did a law and politics degree. So I just kind of followed that path rather than exploring anything else. But I did really enjoy law A level. So that helped kind of solidify for me that I wanted to do a law degree.
So knew about it young, chose your A levels around it, went to Cardiff, good university, studied it, enjoyed it, still enjoyed it,
Yeah,
presumably.
I did. I really enjoyed my undergrad. At the end of my undergrad degree, I did have a kind of not a wobble, but I did think is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I actually took a year out before I did my legal practice course because I was not sure if I wanted to commit to being a solicitor or commit to going into that profession. I graduated in 2008, so the financial crash, there wasn't
Really
a lot
hard.
of jobs going around, and yeah, really hard. And to do the legal practice course, you had to pay, um, and I had to take a loan out to do that. So for me, it felt like such a huge commitment, and I wanted to know before I did it and before I paid for it that this is really what I wanted to do. So I took a year out. I paralegaled for 9 months, and then I went to America to work at Camp America for 3 months.
Oh,
And I
very
remember
cool.
when I came back from Camp America, yeah, I remember when I came back, I phoned the LPC and said, I'm not sure if I still want to be a solicitor now. I thought I wanted to be a teacher after 3 months in America looking after kids. And I phoned them and I said, I don't really want to spend 10,000. Find out I don't want to do it. Can I do a little trial? So after a week, if I don't like it, will you give me my money back? And they said, do you know what? Yes, if you don't like it after a week, we'll give you your money back. And I ended up absolutely loving the LPC. And I think taking a
What a
year out,
brilliant question to ask. And I bet they never get that. Like from a negotiation point of view, and what a fantastic thing to set up. You had an opt out. Um,
yeah,
in
I mean,
writing,
I don't think I would
presumably.
have done it. I think it was over email. Yes,
Hey,
technically,
that
I guess that
counts.
was writing. But I guess if they hadn't given me that option, I probably wouldn't have done it. The financial impact of doing that would have been huge on me. And then finding out I didn't want to be a solicitor, I would have felt like I'd wasted quite a lot of money. But yeah, I ended up absolutely loving the legal practice course. And I think taking a year out of studying before I did it made me enjoy it more. I think I needed that kind of break from studying to really throw myself into it. And because I'd gone from a 9 to 5 job to the LPC, I treated it like a job. So I found it easier to get through it. And
So
yeah,
it's
I
the
just found
uptick
it
in
really
workload
enjoyable.
that you hear about. Because I've heard over the years that the LPC is hard, but probably you were a little bit more in the right frame of mind, I guess, for a longer day if you'd been working.
Yeah, exactly. So and actually the LPC is harder, but it's more self-study, I would say, rather than the actual kind of classes and lectures and things. So I just told myself I'd have to stay there from 9 till 5, which is what I did before. So got all my studying done during the day, and then it didn't feel so bad. And I ended up doing really well on the legal practice course. So yeah, then I realised that was what I wanted to do, and luckily I managed to get a training contract whilst on my LPC. So I knew at the
That's
end of it
good.
I would be able to
So
start
what would have
training.
that would have been around 20 like 09 or 2010-ish around?
Yeah, so that was 09-10, but my legal practice course finished in 2010, and
Yeah.
then but my training most training contracts you get signed up a couple of years in advance. So my training contract didn't start till 2011. So I
Okay.
then had to do another year of kind of paralegaling,
It's good
and I
though
went
because
back to America again.
it was still like the financial crisis was still very much a thing. Like it was a hard time, and I've spoken to a few people who qualified around that, or not qualified, who came out of sort of law school around that time, and it was a tough moment to get into it. And I know lots of people who weren't able to pick up training contracts following doing the LPC. So how was that process? Was that hard with like lots of applications or?
Yeah, it was really hard. So when I was at university in my second year, I actually did they do a lot of vacation schemes in law. So they try and encourage you when you're in your second year to sign up to these vacation schemes. So all of the big law firms offer you 2 weeks working with them, and then you can get a training contract at the end of it. So I did mine with Eversheds, which was probably the biggest firm in Cardiff at the time, but I didn't get offered a training contract. And actually looking back, I'm like, I don't think that was a bad thing because I don't think it was the right fit for me. So going into my LPC, it was quite scary to think I was doing this course, but I knew I couldn't be qualified until I got my training contract. So it was a lot. It was a case of doing a lot of applications, and being in Cardiff. Actually, there wasn't at the time. There wasn't a huge amount of law firms that you could apply to for training contracts.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to go to a smaller firm, it very much was if you knew someone, that's how you would get in. Um, but luckily somebody told a friend of mine was doing a training contract at a firm in Newport, and they had said, oh, they've opened their applications, and I sent my CV in, and luckily I got an interview and managed to get it. But I did feel very privileged that I'd managed to actually get a training contract, because I think in my group, I think there was only 2 of us by the end of the LPC who had a training contract to go to.
Yeah,
So
it's
it was very competitive.
and then so you get the training contract, you're in. Is it like 3 seats, 4 seats?
It's 4 seats, so it's 2 years. The where I did it was 4 seats of 6 months each.
Okay. And was it mixed? Like, were you instantly like private client is what I'm into? Like, how was that experience
No.
of doing different things?
Yeah, so I really loved private client on the LPC. So when we did the LPC, you do a lot of practical tests, like and it was based on to make a will. And I remember my interview being picked as like the example, and I thought, oh, maybe actually might be something I'm good at, and something I enjoyed. So I already loved private client on the legal practice course, but when I started my training contract, my first seat was in childcare. So I remember on my second day, I was straight in court,
Oh, geez.
sitting on a childcare hearing. Yeah, it was very full on. So I thought after that 6 months, I was like, oh, maybe this is what I wanted to do. But I did find it quite tough. I mean, anyone who does childcare, it's emotionally very draining. It can be very sad. Um, so there was always in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go back to childcare. And then my second seat was a big mix of commercial, property, employment, disputes. And I enjoyed it, but I've never been someone who wanted to be in the commercial world. I've always preferred dealing with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably my strength, is my people skills. And my third seat was actually private client. And that was only because I begged to do a private client seat, because they didn't normally give private client seats to trainees in the firm I trained in. But I was like, I have to do a private client seat. It's something I really want to do. And yeah, and then I loved it. And then my last seat was clinical negligence, and I ended up really enjoying that. So by the end of my training contract, I was like, oh, I quite enjoyed all my seats. So
Yeah.
it was then more of a case of, where can I get a job? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's what it came down to.
Yeah. That
And
everything
there
in life
weren't,
has got practical considerations, just like the financial commitment of the LPC and then the commercial reality of like needing a job. So yeah, that's I think that's not unusual.
yeah, and my firm didn't keep on any of the trainees in my year, so we had to just go out and find a newly qualified job. And that I found that probably the hardest thing, because everyone wants someone with experience. So you have your 6 months in that seat, but you don't have a huge amount of experience.
Yeah.
So trying to find a newly qualified job was really difficult, and I just applied everywhere and anywhere. I was applying to places in Oxford, in Cardiff, in Bristol, and again I got extremely lucky, and I managed to send my CV to a firm in Bristol who were actually looking for someone who was 4 years post qualified, and I was like, well, I don't have 4 years post qualified experience, but why don't you just kind of take a chance?
So good.
And they emailed me back, gave me an interview, and then gave me a job, and I was so grateful.
Do you know what?
And that's how I ended up in private client.
This
Yeah.
conversation, I mean, we haven't even really got into the sort of post training thing, but like there's some really like there's so many awesome examples of like thinking outside the box in terms of like the conversation about the LPC and whether you could get a refund if you didn't like it, applying for a job that was 4 years PQE and just saying, well, I'm just applying anyway. Um, and what was the other one? Oh, asking to do a private client seat where the firm didn't normally do a private client seat. I mean, this is like invaluable, and I think it's an underrated skill. Like you never get taught that in school. Like most people just, there are rules and you follow the rules and that's what gets you ahead. But um oh God, I think people could learn so much just from those three examples of like if you ask, often the answer is yes, even if it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like you have to just ask. And I think especially if you're newly qualified, don't ever be put off by someone wanting someone that's far more qualified than you are, because as someone now who's looking to recruit people, I think most firms just want someone who's enthusiastic, that's willing to learn, and that will work hard. And I think if you can show all those attributes, firms will be very open to looking at you and taking you on.
It really
And
paint.
my motto was always, yeah, everyone has to start somewhere. So all these firms that are looking for people 4 or 5 PQE, what's wrong with someone that's newly qualified that you can mold and you can shape as you want them?
Yeah.
I think that's always, and like I think that's something that firms should be more open to, because I think if you can help, because you're basically helping training that person really if you take on newly qualified.
Yeah, it's so true. I had a sort of similar experience at the investment bank I was working at. Again, this is in the middle of the financial crisis, and people were getting let go left, right, and center. And I basically was doing a job where I didn't have enough to do, and I was like, "Oh God, I haven't got enough to do. This is like vulnerable." So I was like, "Well, if I flag to anyone that will listen, that I don't have enough to do, no one can, no one can turn to me and say like, is that all you do?" So I just was to anyone sort of more senior. I was like, "What can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" And there was this dying product that no one wanted. All the front office team had been fired, had been got rid of, that had been doing it. The guys in operations didn't want to deal with it because it was dying. And they were like, "Oh, would you want to do this?" I was like, "Yeah, give it to me." Um, and it was a dying product, but it wasn't dead. And it had like years left to run. And I ended up in this weird position where I was the only person who knew how to do it. And it basically saved me for those like the 3 years during the worst of the financial crisis, because I just basically kept pestering for more work. Now obviously I didn't know that they would
And
probably.
it made you invaluable to them then,
Well, yeah,
because
just I mean,
no one else could do it.
there's luck involved in that, but also I did ask. I did ask for
Yeah.
more stuff. So yeah, it's
Do you know, I
interesting.
remember on my third week of my training contract, I was working for someone who had to go to court a lot. And if she didn't need you at court, you would just kind of sit in the office and doing any office work. And I remember by the third day where she'd gone to court and hadn't left me anything, I was like, can you please give me something to do? Because I was like, I can't sit here and not do anything. I'm going to start asking other people for work. And I think
Yeah.
that really took her aback. She was a bit like, what do you mean? Why do you want something to do? And I was like, I'm not one of those people that just want to sit there and not do
No.
anything. I'd much rather be busy. So I think asking is always the best option.
Yeah. So you're in it. You're doing private. So you get private client work. So just for those who don't know, because private client work in legal terms is referring to what?
So I mainly do preparation of wills, lasting powers of attorney, and estate administration. And then in with wills, you kind of got the estate planning, so some tax advice, and then planning for the future, basically.
An estate administration, is that probate work, presumably?
Probate work, yeah. So dealing with someone's estate when they pass away. That could
Okay.
be an intestate where they died without a will, or when they've got a will and you're administering the will.
So what's the I mean, we already talked about dealing with people, and it is no surprise to me that you enjoy dealing with people because you're so good at it. Is that the main thing you like about it? Is it the people interactions? And I mean, I completely agree. I find dealing with individuals really, really rewarding, in a way that corporate it can be, but it's a different thing. So is it the people side of things, or is it the sort of technicalities of the role as well?
I think it's a bit of both. Like I love meeting new people. I love the feeling of being able to help someone, and to know you've made a difference to someone, because obviously I quite often see people in a very vulnerable state, or at a very sad part of their life, quite often right at the end of their life. And I remember one of my first feedbacks was like, you gave us so much reassurance at a really hard time, and it's really lovely to know you can do that. And I think dealing with that gives your day so much variety, and it keeps you on your toes because you're meeting different people, dealing with different people. So I think for me the people aspect is really good, but I do love nothing more than spending a day doing a set of estate accounts. So I do love the little geeky side of me comes out when I get to do a full set of estate accounts. So I love the technical kind of tax and estate side of it as well. I
It
like a good balance in my week.
Yeah, it is, and it is nice having sort of the client interaction moments, but then the other bits of the job where you do get to or have to just sit quietly and just say like, right, no one talk to me. I just need to work through this set of circumstances, this problem, and find a solution. It's interesting about your role as well, and what you do. Even if it's not always 100% obvious to people what the value add of maybe your team would be, I often think that you guys come up with something. There's such a knowledge gap between sort of general public and what private client solicitors do, that you can just have these massive value adds that you couldn't necessarily have predicted when they walked in or when they picked up the phone. But then you just uncover something about their circumstances, and you're like, well, actually, look, have you considered this? And it just adds so much value to what the situation that they're in. Is that something you find?
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think that's definitely the case. Like when people come in, quite often they have a very distinct idea of what they want to do, and then when you talk them through it, you think you actually give them other ideas that will work better, maybe save them some inheritance tax. You give them options that they wouldn't have thought of. And I think that the biggest problem in our profession at the moment is that a lot of people are trying to do a lot of this themselves, and whilst there is a lot of information online, it's not always clear and it can be quite confusing. So I do think we add quite a lot of value in explaining processes to people and explaining the options out there, and hopefully, in quite a lot of the circumstances, sometimes saving them a little bit of inheritance tax.
That's good. Well, look, IHT is, I mean, that comes up in so many meetings that we have. What is it? So, like, what might be an example of something that you'll see in an estate where IHT can potentially be saved that people may not have considered? What does that look like?
So sometimes if people have business assets, quite often the intention is to leave everything to the spouse, where you would get spousal exemption anyway.
Yeah,
But if you've got business assets, it's always good to think about maybe creating a trust to put the business assets in. So then you have the option to pass those on to your children. So you can use business property relief as opposed to spousal exemption. So you're not losing your business property relief. You're making full use of the, and that takes it out of the estate then for second death, where business property relief may or may not be available. So you're trying to use up all the exemptions and reliefs you can. And I think especially now with the changes coming to agricultural property relief and business property relief in 2026, that's even more important, because I think we've all got very much used to spousal exemption on first death and then taken advantage of the transferable nil rate band on second death
yeah.
and full agricultural and business property relief being available on second death. That's no longer going to be the case. You're going to have this £1 million cap for APR and BPR. So I think planning now is more important than ever.
And if it's in a trust, and I always feel bad because I always intend to not ask technical questions, and then I always like it occurs to me, and I'm like, what's that? So if in a trust, is it assets? Are they a potentially exempt transfer when they're put into the trust? So then, or is it?
So no, this trust would be normally on death
Yeah,
rather than during your lifetime. You can set up trusts during your lifetime. They would normally be lifetime charge that do have a tax implication depending on how much you put in.
yeah.
But if you set up a trust on death, you obviously use up the business property relief on that trust. So there shouldn't be any tax implications
Oh, I
on death
see.
in terms of setting up the trust.
What's the circumstances? So for any financial advisors listening, what are the? I mean, I guess there's obvious ones, and most of us have on our fact find. We ask clients if they've got a will. That's pretty typical. I think with focus around vulnerable clients, like advisors and planners are asking about powers of attorney now much more. I think everyone always asked about, do you have a will? But powers of attorney, I think, are getting a lot more of attention. So that's kind of an obvious one for us.
And I
One to
think it's
maybe
so important.
which
Yeah,
one?
I think a lot more people, the lasting powers of attorney, I
Okay.
think arguably is more important. Especially for you as financial advisors, because if somebody loses capacity and they don't have one in place, you can't necessarily carry on doing what you're doing for them without any instruction. So I think the lasting power of attorney is particularly important
Yeah, I think
and
it,
older.
and it's really good, and it's not like the most fun topic, but I tell you what, if you need it, it's so useful. And what I tend to say to people is like, if you lose capacity, someone will be making decisions for you. All the power of attorney is doing is letting you choose who that person is. And I think often when you frame it in that respect, they're like, oh yeah, that is quite good.
Do you know, that's exactly how I frame it. It's your way of keeping control. So you are controlling who actually helps you when you as you get older, rather than leaving it to someone else to make that decision for you.
Who does it fall to if you don't complete one? Is it next of kin, or who makes that decision?
So if you lose capacity and you don't have a lasting power of attorney in place, then either family members or even solicitors can apply to the Court of Protection for a deputyship order. So who ends up becoming your deputy depends on who makes the application, basically. It's usually next of kin, so it usually would be family. It can be a panel deputy. So there are lots of solicitors that are on the panel of deputies, and the court can appoint deputy. So a solicitor that could be on the other side of the country to you, and somebody you've never met could end up becoming your deputy and dealing with your affairs. So that's why, and that process can take sort of 12 to 18 months. So you could
Wow.
go 12 to 18 months without having
That's a
someone
long time.
making decisions for you. It really is, especially if all your assets start freezing and no one's able to pay your care bills, pay your house bills. It can be a really long time. So having the lasting power of attorney in place just ensures that somebody can carry on looking after you and looking after your finances and your health decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is valuable. And on the trust side, what's the circumstances advisors might be sort of thinking might find themselves in where they should be thinking, I need to bring in some extra help at this point.
Um, So, yeah, it depends on the circumstances, but quite often when I speak to financial advisors, I think now with the impending changes to inheritance tax, I don't think there's any harm in bringing advisors together at the earliest opportunity. I still firmly believe that when you're dealing with private clients, that a sort of two or three pronged approach is much better. I'd much rather
Yeah.
be in the room with the financial advisor and the accountant and make sure we're all on the same page as to what is the best options for this client, because we all have very different specialities in terms of the knowledge we have and the advice we're given. And I think it's so important to make sure that your accountant, your financial advisor, and your solicitor are all on the same page and they all know what each other's doing, so you can all do something that complements each other and don't go against what other people are advising, and you just want to make
Yeah.
sure you're all on the same page. I think especially where people have business assets, agricultural assets, and now where people have quite large pension pots, I think given the changes that's coming into that, I think having your financial advisor and your solicitor working together is so important.
The agricultural side is really huge. I was having a conversation with a journalist who was doing a feature on the Southwest, and they were asking about what are the differences between sort of the London market and the Southwest market. And I mentioned sort of the agricultural rural sector as probably one of the key differences. And there is a lot of expertise in Bristol, Bath, Exeter, Cheltenham, I think, that do focus on that. And it's so at Glance, we tend to focus on professional services. So a lot of our client bank is sort of ex-bankers, solicitors, and that sort of professional service market in Bristol, smattering of engineers because we're sort of near a bit of an aerospace cluster. But I don't do as
Milton.
much with sort of rural landowners, farming type. But I know it is a big area. So yeah, that is quite useful to know.
Yeah, it is a big area, and I think it's become so prominent now that people are having to really think about what they're going to do. Succession planning for farmers now is probably more than ever. Although I have spoken to some farmers recently who've actually said, well, I don't think the inheritance tax rules change is too bad, because I think we needed something to stop people taking advantage of the current agricultural property rules. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's varying opinions on it, but I think yeah, for farmers, for landowners, especially farmers who farm as their business, because you don't have 1 million for the business and 1 million for the agricultural assets in
yeah,
terms of the exemption. So I think it's even more important for them to start thinking about succession planning. Do you pass your assets to your children now, or do you leave it to your death? So
yeah,
obviously, if you start gifting during your lifetime, if they become potentially exempt transfers, and if you survive 7 years, then they come out of your estate. So that's what I think people are having to think about, is probably bringing gifting forward.
yeah, yeah. It makes sense.
And
There's
that takes planning with a financial advisor as well, because you don't want to give assets away that you actually will need to rely on for your own well-being or your
This
own
comes up a lot, you know.
finances later down. Yeah, because how
It
do you know how much money you're going to need?
Yeah, it's really difficult and something you just don't know. You don't know if someone's going to need care, whether they're not, whether they'll pass away suddenly or after an extended illness. And also like there isn't I do say this to sort of older clients that have got adult children and they are thinking about gifting. I do sort of remind them that when people run out of money, or if you were to run out of money, people turn to their children. So I kind of say to them, by provisioning for yourself, that is actually like kind of responsible parenting as well, because you're making sure you're not having to go or lean on or rely on the children. And actually that's sometimes helpful to let them know.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I always say to clients before they think about making any gifts at all, I always encourage them to speak to their financial advisor, because you guys are
Perfect.
always in a good position um, to kind of work out how much money they need, because I think you do sort of financial profiling on them and things like that. So you're in a very good position to kind of it's not an exact science and you're not going to get it perfect, but you can at least have a rough idea of what they will need until they reach a certain age, even into sort of taking into account the care costs. So I think before anyone gifts, they have to really think about what their future income and expenditure will be before they make those gifts, because you want to look after yourself first and foremost. That's what the money's there for.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if people do gift to their children, I always say that you want to make sure that your children have wills in place and things like that, because if you're gifting substantial amounts to your children, then you want to make sure that they have covered themselves in terms of wills and
Yeah.
make sure
It's
their
interesting what you
succession
said
planning is
about
sorted out.
the agricultural relief and whether there was a sort of whether it was performing the function. And I think with, without straying into the politics of that change, I think, and I said this on a video that I sent out to our clients, there was definitely an industry that built up around agricultural relief as a product, as like a IHT solution, and full sympathy for the farmers and all the rest of it. But there definitely was an element where it's like, buy forestry, and you're like, what do I want a forest for? And they're like, well, let me tell you about forestry.
Yeah.
That was a thing, and I suspect the rules were aimed at targeting, the IHT productization of land and forestry and stuff, and maybe not necessarily farmers, but the rules don't seem to make any allowances for that difference.
Yeah, no, completely. I think you're right, and I think that's exactly why agricultural property relief has probably been hit. But it's the farmers that unfortunately are going to be the ones that suffer, because to pay, it's how is the inheritance tax going to be paid, and that's going to be the biggest challenge, because if all the value is in the land,
Yeah.
where do you find the money to pay the IHT? And I think that's where financial advisors as well are going to be worth their weight in gold, because you guys have access to a lot more options in terms of insurance and planning for the payment of inheritance tax, which us private client solicitors just can't advise on. So that's why, again, why working with a financial advisor is so important.
Oh, you know what? That was one of my next question was going to be about when do you pull in advisors, but you very kindly talked about it. Is that so for sort of more junior solicitors who haven't maybe worked with financial advisors or planners before? Is what is the moment from your point of view that you do tend to refer? Is it maybe when people maybe inherit an amount of money that maybe they're not used to, like they're used to having that amount? Is it at that point, or is it for IHT solutions pre-death?
I would say both. So when I sit down with a new client, one of the first questions I ask in our first meeting is, do you have a financial advisor? And if they don't, and I think they're going to have an inheritance tax problem, or even that they have assets that could probably do with some investment and things like that, I will always recommend a financial advisor at that point. Quite often clients already have their advisors. So if they already
Yeah.
have advisors, I will say, make sure you go back to your advisor and get some inheritance tax advice. And then, yeah, you're completely right. When someone inherits, we encourage people, especially if they're going to inherit a large amount of money, we highlight to those beneficiaries that this is going to have an impact on their inheritance tax liability and that they should seek advice. So both
Perfect.
situations we would refer.
And
Is that the right answer?
I think so. I like it anyway. I think it is the right answer, 100%. And it is good. Like I honestly, like it's when we started the private client network, and I said in my intro, it was about, to a certain extent, building our respective businesses and client banks. But the sharing of knowledge is 100% up there, and providing a better service to our clients, 100% up there. If you're a financial advisor and you're not, flagging a lack of powers of attorney or wills or whatever it is, you're not adding as much value as you should be. So I wholeheartedly, and the same true of solicitors, maybe you aren't flagging when people should seek advice from other professions. So no, thank you. And I do unsurprisingly agree. To finish, you've made partner in two firms, a really interesting start to your career. Do you have any advice for any junior solicitors or maybe sort of associates, senior associates that are progressing through their career on progressing in general or making partner specifically?
I think for me, working hard is obviously number one. making sure you're doing your billing. But I think one of the main reasons I made partner in both firms was the networking. I've always been an active
Yeah.
networker. I came to Bristol and I did not know a soul. I didn't know anyone. So the only way my network was to go out there and to meet people, and I went to everything. Like, we met through Bristol Junior Chamber a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think I also came to your first ever private client network event.
Ah,
So I've always tried to network, and follow up with people. Make sure you keep in contact, and it's all well and good going to these events, but follow up afterwards. Make sure people remember you, and people speak to you, and make sure you're letting the people you work with know what you're doing. I think quite a lot of people will kind of do things but not always flag it to the powers that be, that the people that will actually make the decision on promotions and things like that. So I think there is an element of being able to shout about what you're doing and make sure people are aware of how hard you're working. But yeah, definitely always make sure you're doing your billing, and networking for me was definitely the
yeah.
way that I got promoted, I
I
think.
think it's really good advice. I think it's really good advice, and I completely agree about the follow up. I say this all the time to people who either come to events or particularly sponsors. Like, the difference between those that get more out of it and those that don't is usually down to the follow up, and whether they've got time or capacity to do it. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Um, Thank you so much for coming on. This has been brilliant. And obviously we've known each other a long time, but there was a load of stuff in there that I didn't know. And particularly those three things about, putting yourself out there and asking for things that are not strictly on the you're allowed to do it list. People should pay attention to that. I think everyone would be surprised how many opportunities in life are not flagged and you've got to ask. And then people often will maybe they'll say no, but often they'll turn around and go, yeah, okay. And then boom, you've got something that no one else has got just because you asked. So thank you. It's been brilliant. I appreciate it.
Oh no, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Cool. I'll catch you at an event soon, hopefully.
Yes, see you soon.